Welcome, everybody, to our Monday night education. My name is Valerie Bledsoe, and I am here to take you on a journey where we get to learn more about the amazing benefits of our medicinal mushroom powder blend, which is called NeuroIM. So let's jump on in here and see what we get to learn. Let's hear first what Tammy has to say.
Hi, everybody. Val, thank you so much for having me tonight. I love talking about NeuroIM, and I've noticed that, like, with my clients, it's always at the top of the list now for people, and I think it's because it does so much. It does so much, and I actually just put my husband on it because of the inflammation it's supposed to help with, and cholesterol it's supposed to help with, and blood pressure it's supposed to help with, and for me, sugar. I mean, it just does so much. But why I started on it, which was from the beginning, or not why I started on it, I don't know if I knew it was going to do this. But for me, one of the issues I've always had is, in my mind, I was a mess. I could not, as a symptom of my depression and anxiety, I could not think straight or clearly. I could sit and see everything that needed to be done and organized, but would become so overwhelmed, I would just shut down and it would get worse. Now, the other side of that is, when I was not going through that, I was almost OCD. I could come to your house. I could help you organize. I could help you get everything done and think clearly. But when it came to myself, it was not possible. Or it was, I needed it to be perfect. And if it wasn't, forget it. NeuroIM, from the first time that I took it, and I take it with the Power Chi, there's something to me about the combination. From the first time I took it, it was just like I could see clearly. I could think clearly. I could be motivated to start doing what before I was so overwhelmed I would just shut down from. And you know, one thing causes another. When you're that overwhelmed, you become anxious. So for me, in my life, I cannot, it was one of my favorite from the very beginning because it solved an issue I didn't see it solving, and one of my biggest issues that I've needed help with. So thank you all so much for NeuroIM. I absolutely love it. And now we're all on it because it feels like it's just one of those do everything supplements. And almost all of my clients are on it too. So thank you so much. Mwah. You guys have a great evening. Bye, everybody.
Tammy pretty much nails it. And as I went on and was breaking each mushroom down in this blend, which the first 5 we covered in part 1, we're covering the second 5 in this part 2. I just became more and more aware and was reminded again why I love this blend so much, because of everything that it does. So one of the first mushrooms that we're going to look at tonight is called Messima. Maybe it's Messima. I think it's Messima. Anyhow, I think this is actually a pretty beautiful mushroom, and I have noticed this on a lot of trees. Once I became, start studying it, we'll be driving somewhere and just, it stands out, it jumps out at you. And the neat thing is thinking of all the different types of benefits and everything that it has. So first we look at anti-allergenic effects. Now this becomes pretty important whenever you think of some of the additional ways to use this mushroom blend, as opposed to just, let's say, some of the basics that we're already aware of with brain support and nervous system support, things like that. But think of maybe having an allergic reaction or something. So this might help support the body in getting rid of that issue. It also is really strong in its ability to fight staph and MRSA. MRSA, of course, is a methyl resistance. Staph aureus, I'm not saying it correct, but anyhow, MRSA, it's one of those antibiotic resistant strains that is much more challenging to work with. And so having something like this in this blend becomes very important. Plus the word potent, actually the word potent to me applies to all our soul formulas. And so when we have these blends of all these mushrooms together, the 10 mushrooms in this blend, and I look at it and I'm going, wow, I get these 10 different mushrooms all in this. When I look at the individual mushrooms, I'll see a bag of the powder and it might be $20, $30. I'm thinking, wow, we have 10 of that. 10 of those, and we have it all in these little capsules. It just underscores to me, and it makes me even more excited that we have it. So this mushroom is also gastroprotective. So think of it for gut discomfort or pain, chronic diarrhea. And this is really important for someone that might have overdone NSAID use, or maybe they have to use it constantly, NSAIDs. And this would be great to get in and help protect the gut from that type of effect from that medication. So very important. This was very unique as well. Excessive menstrual bleeding. When we have clotting or high volume type of bleeding going on that is more than should be there for a cycle, then this is a mushroom that would be beneficial to help challenge that. It also works with arthritis. And this stuff is all backed, all this information is backed in studies. And I've got my references at the very end for where I've gotten all the information from both of these, part 1 and part 2. And also, like the other mushrooms, is immunomodulatory, which, remember, helps the immune system to respond appropriately, as in the correct or a good balanced response for the body. It also has the anti-tumor properties, and then it's going to protect the liver. That's what hepatoprotective means. Again, very important because the liver processes so many toxins, so many chemicals, and is just assaulted in so many different ways. Along with it, when it gets overwhelmed, then it has a harder time doing its normal everyday duties, like helping with the hormones, helping to regulate and deal with stress, and what its role is in so many different things. It's one of the most overworked and underappreciated organs in the body. And then this mushroom is also cardioprotective. So again, it's going to protect the heart. And then finally, anti-diabetic type effect. So it helps to balance blood sugar, which we have seen in every single one of these mushrooms. Maitake is a great mushroom. Look how beautiful this is. And again, I love all these photos and the different, they're just beautiful mushrooms to me. And so this one is pretty neat. And it has some things we're already familiar with. Again, the antiviral and antimicrobial properties right there. Now, it's also rich in what we call is known as beta-glucans. So in a nutshell, or simplified, what a beta-glucan does is it helps to kind of direct the immune cells, the immune response, so it can get in and do what it needs to do. So it can activate the type of immune cells, whether it's T cells or macrophages or whatever, it can it directs that. That's probably the simplest way to explain that. Adaptogenic properties, which means, of course, it's going to help the body to deal and bounce back and be more resilient to stress. Chronic fatigue. This was unique in what this mushroom did with help with chronic fatigue. Candida as well. We see a lot of women that unfortunately end up dealing with candida in response to either their lifestyle and diet or different medications. Maybe they've had to be on an antibiotic in particular. So coming in with this mushroom being in our NeuroIM, fantastic way to help prevent candida from getting out of balance after having to utilize that medication. It also is known to address uterine fibroids. And again, helping to challenge that and get that issue under control. We see again our blood sugar balancing along with insulin resistance. Because remember, those can be two separate issues that can later on become, you often see one with the other, but not always. So insulin resistance. And another thing to be aware of, you can actually have insulin resistance in different organs, but not in all your organs at the same time. You might have insulin resistance, for instance, in the brain, but not have it in your liver, not have it in your pancreas. So having these mushrooms, and in this case, I specifically chose those areas of the body because the mushrooms have an affinity for that. So I think that's one of the reasons when you get in and start studying insulin resistance or blood sugar issues when it comes with the brain, the fact that all these mushrooms help address that type of an issue makes our understanding of this formula, it just makes sense why we get the results that we do. And of course, blood pressure, whether it's low or high, can be a pre-diabetic sign. It makes sense if we can come in and help support our blood sugar balance and an insulin resistance, that we would be able to have the benefits of blood pressure getting normalized. At this point, I think virtually all of our mushrooms have also helped support healthy cholesterol levels. Sometimes you'll see that listed as hyperlipidemia, getting that challenged. And then this is important as well. This mushroom in particular is very good at adsorbing that is not a typo, adsorbing as opposed to absorbing mercury. And it does that in the blood, the liver, and kidneys. Very, very important when you're talking about some of the exposures that people have had to toxins. Maybe in this type of case, it could be dental work. Some of the people have the old silver fillings, and that mercury goes through and it can settle like in the kidneys and can cause a lot of issues. So this mushroom is very good at that. And would you believe it that this mushroom can grow up to 40 to 50 pounds? I can't even imagine toting around a mushroom that size. It's just absolutely huge. So let's hear a little bit more about the many things that the NeuroIM can do. But look at all these different things. These are direct quotes from people. My dad is regaining flexibility in his toes from nerve damage and back surgery. I can think straight. I can find my words and not lose track as I speak. Thank you. We're going to hear a lot of that. A lot of people are very aware of having that result. I was having issues articulating my words recently. Since starting neuro, it has stopped almost completely. How many of you get frustrated when you go to say something and maybe you create a whole new word or you just stumble over it? I know that I've had that issue in the past. And I know that we watch as people age that they tend to accept that as part of aging. Well, one of the neat things with the NeuroIM is I think that we're being able to effectively challenge that. More focus while reading through long documents, better memory recall, improvement in lost words to articulate, and dropping off to sleep faster. Are you starting to see a trend here? A lot of stuff with the brain function. It's helped my dad's speech. He has Parkinson's. You can understand him and hear his words. So exciting. And then finally, this one, relief from some of my worst headaches. The fogginess of early onset, or what we think is early onset, is pretty much gone. I have regained the ability to hold more than one thought and execute it, actually able to multitask again. These are exciting, exciting benefits, guys. I just love what the benefits and the stories that we're hearing from our neuro. Shiitake is another mushroom that we have in here. And it is, when we've seen these really vibrant mushrooms, this one looks kind of bland and more simple, but is nonetheless powerful in what it does. It is a mushroom that has been studied and proven to inhibit the HIV virus. It also challenges atopic dermatitis. So it's going to affect our skin health. And remember, dermatitis, when you break down the words, it just means derma is skin, itis is irritation or inflammation of. So it just has to do with an irritation or inflammation of that skin and then the placement. Again, we are familiar with these. The hyperlipidemia, remember, is having to do with high cholesterol. It's antioxidant, very strong antioxidant. That's another reason we think we see so many benefits with the brain, because it's reducing oxidative stress in the brain. And then again, that beta glucan rich. This one's unique that it's very rich in vitamin B. So if we think and are aware and reminded that B vitamins are used up during stress in a big way. In fact, that's a very quick way to become deficient. And if you're not getting them in your diet, because it is a water soluble vitamin, the body dumps it out. The excess is gone. So having this in yet another protocol or formula here and finding out that this mushroom is B vitamin rich is really, really beneficial. And of course, we know B vitamins are also, B6 in particular, are utilized a lot and beneficial for women during PMS. So that might be interesting to watch and see. Do we have stories where women that once they added in the NeuroIM, they stopped having as many PMS issues? And it does support our liver and brain health. And this was really neat. There are specific studies about how this mushroom benefits dental health. Specifically, there was a study where these volunteers rinsed their mouths with a solution that contained shiitake mushrooms. And there were specific results. They reduced cavities, and it happened because they were able to protect that dental enamel from that cavity-creating bacteria. They were able to disrupt the specific bacteria-laden biofilms. They also killed the bacteria, and it also disrupted the functioning of Streptococcus mutans. And that study you can find in the Dr. Allison's Tim Medicinal mushroom book. But that is so unique and so cool that that actually works to challenge that issue. I never would have guessed that a mushroom can have that type of a benefit for people. Now, here to me, right along with the turkey tail, is one of the more beautiful mushrooms. I just love the coloration in it. And so let's look at the benefits. It is one of the oldest known medicinal mushrooms that are out there, and it is considered the top herb in Chinese medicine. So it is very prized and valued in the Chinese culture of medicine. It is an immunomodulator. So remember, it's going to help that immune system do its job and have the correct response that we need to whatever's going on. It also helps prevent or protect, not prevent, protect the neurotransmitters. So it can help protect them from damage. It could be against multiple different things. So as we have learned about how several of these mushrooms are protect the body against chemo and radiation. Well, one of the things that gets damaged a lot is going to be those neurotransmitters. It is very good antibacterial and antiviral. It also challenges the HIV and gram-positive bacteria. So hepatoprotective, so it protects the liver. Whenever injury has occurred, we've got cirrhosis, and it also improves liver function. And I don't know if you know, but cirrhosis does not only come as a result of someone who had a lot of alcohol intake. There's other conditions that can create that for someone. Gastric ulcers. So again, we're seeing a lot of things that have to do with the gut. Let's also remember how the gut ties in with brain function and immune function. So we can see this kind of three-way conversation or connection that's going on here. It also helps to restore your prostaglandin levels to normal. So otherwise it works on getting inflammation to, if it's like some people will just swell and respond and they can't back the swelling up, which is why that, you might come with steroids or multiple different things. But prostaglandins have to do with inflammation. We see here again, fibromyalgia, adaptogenic hyperlipidemia. Remember, that's your cholesterol type concerns. So helping to challenge all of these. This was pretty cool too, how this prevents and combats altitude sickness. So remember, our Vital is very good at working with altitude sickness. Well, guess what? Your NeuroIM is as well. And here's where we see where I was talking about protecting the neurotransmitters. One of the reasons might be because of its ability to help protect the body from damage from either chemotherapy or radiation, but also notice that it's also chemotherapy enhancing, thereby. And remember, do not ever underestimate the power and the brilliance of which our body was designed. The body knows where an issue might be and as to which cells maybe are not replicating properly. Therefore, the doctors have diagnosed maybe someone with cancer. Well, the mushrooms can help the body to isolate and help the body to get that chemo directly where it needs to go, enhance its results while protecting the rest of the body. It's also very important that it's kidney protective, because as the body works to move this out of the system, we want to keep those kidneys from being destroyed and shutting down. And then, of course, anti-tumor type properties. So if you're familiar with this man, his name is Dr. Amen. He has spent his life's work, let's just say, studying the brain. And one of the things I love is his pictures of the brains. And so what I want you to pay attention to is what I'm going to, so notice the healthy brain here. And then we've got a brain next to it that's had trauma. It doesn't really matter what type of trauma. I just want you to notice the difference in how it's structured. Notice the difference between a healthy brain and a brain that has had 2 strokes. And you can tell these strokes on that right side of the brain. Here we have a healthy brain as compared to one with Alzheimer's. And then finally, we have a healthy brain versus one with drug abuse. And remember, drug abuse does not have to be someone that's out, doing illegal drugs. This could be someone that this is drug affected because this is what has been prescribed for them. So what do you notice is similar in all these? Well, for me, it's all the different holes that are there in the structure of the brain now. So what I want you to think of is the brain like a map. It's a map in the essence that it sends signals all different directions. So here I pull up, let's put a map of Oklahoma here. Right now, if you wanted to go from Oklahoma City up here to Tulsa and then going up to the four-state area up over here in Joplin, Neosho, all this area was my old stomping ground. So let's compare this to the healthy brain, and then let's drop that in there. Let's say that's an area that got, like on the brains down here, got damaged. But in this case, it totally, that part of the map you could not traverse anymore because that geography was messed up. Well, guess what? We still need to get from point A to point B. So what do? We reroute, we correct, and figure out how do we connect different roads to get around, or how do we build new roads to get around. That's what the brain does. That's why this formula is so important, because it helps support the brain in creating new connections or stopping the degradation. For instance, let's say that white spot was to get bigger and bigger. What if it slowed it down? Would that not increase the quality of your brain function? And why is this important? Remember, your brain runs your body. You don't know what memory might be tied into a certain area. You don't know what function, what ability to retrieve what thought, what ability to move what part of the body. And if those areas get damaged, and they get damaged easily, guys, life does it. We do it with aging, our lifestyle, accidents, physical things. There's so many different things. It becomes very important to support the brain. And this NeuroIM is an outstanding formula to help do that. So one of our lesser known mushrooms is called Agaricus Blazei. And it's not particularly exciting to look at, but it does have some kind of, generalized support systems that comes in. It kind of rounds out this formula very nicely. It does challenge potentials with atherosclerosis. Here we see how it works with hepatitis, so it's working with that liver. We've got the cholesterol stuff again. We see blood sugar issues, skin issues, challenging with cancer. Apparently, I thought hepatitis needed to be mentioned twice because I put that in there. It protects the brain and liver from damage by acetaminophen. I think that's very important, because how many times have we seen, sorry guys, choking on my own spit here. Unfortunately, maybe someone was taking a lot of acetaminophen to try and work with pain, or that's what they were directed to do, and they ended up damaging the brain and liver. And that's hard to come back from. This mushroom has specific benefits for challenging that issue. And I really wanted to point that out. And then it also protects a major nerve center in the gut from what they call age-related decline. So as we age, like I said, part of the gut and the ability to remember things and memory, thinking, all this does tie back to gut health. So this mushroom does challenge that. And then it does have adaptogenic properties. And now I want to turn this over to Greg. See if he had a few thoughts on the NeuroIM. So, Greg, do you need me to make you a co-host?
No, I'm good, Valerie. Sometimes it's better not for me not to have slides. Tonight's one of those nights. I hope everyone's doing well this afternoon. I always feel privileged to come and listen to Valerie teach and to share together with you some of our experiences. As Valerie and I just texted back and forth earlier today, I got thinking about a couple of pieces of information from a formulating point of view that might be insightful. And I kind of thought I'd share that. And it's interesting that Valerie ended with the Agaricus, which I think ours comes from Brazil. I know most of these will grow in different parts of the world. But I think Brazil is where we get it. I remember years ago the Shiitake. So here's another one that Valerie talked about tonight. I remember going, oh, sorry, not the Shiitake, the Maitake. I remember Valerie going with, do you remember Kalman, Marcus?
Yes.
I remember going through the woods of Pennsylvania with him. He knew the places where they grew, and we'd harvest them, go back, and he put them in a healthy oil. He bred them. I can't remember what he breaded them with. And we put them in healthy oil and we'd eat them, and they're really good. But why did we choose this particular 10? I mean, there are a lot of reasons. But Valerie touched on one with the Agaricus. What really intrigued us with that was nerve protection of the gut, and our belief that so much, maybe we just can call it undiscovered or undiagnosed, unhighlighted damage is really typical in the digestive system in multiple places nowadays, with so many of us to one degree or another. And when we get our nutrition in order and we get our diets and our the stresses in life, where we've got some solutions, we're working to improve that, then we see things change. And Agaricus to us is one of those mushrooms that we thought could make a big difference there in terms of that important nerve cluster. I don't even know what it's called, Valerie. I can't remember the name. You probably do. But one of those main nerve centers in the gut. So you got me thinking about that. There's been some talk about B12. And just the other day, I was asked to share this because someone had some questions about which of the Soul products have B12 in them. And would you know, several of these mushrooms do. There's a lot of debate. For as many articles as you'll see, this mushroom has B12. You'll see some that say, oh, it doesn't have any. I can't tell you how many I've seen that say no plant has B12. And the closest one that I saw that brought truth, and he wasn't even right, sorry to say that, was and this isn't because we're not still learning, but this is a road we've been down for many years. He said that the reason that you'd find it, for instance, in alfalfa and on certain mushrooms is because they weren't cleaned thoroughly. And B12 is produced by several different strains of friendly bacteria. Okay, that's one of those statements that's got some truth in it, and it's also got some an assumption that is just not correct. It's not always not cleaning. The fact is that the way you clean and the way you extract plants, nutrients from plants has changed. And some of these best strains for producing B12 are heat resistant. It's why we actually included them in our formulas. And just because there is a friendly bacteria, which we're like the tip of the iceberg understanding the varieties of friendly flora, right? Really the tip of the iceberg. We know there are so many hundreds of thousands, and we know a few. In other words, they're there, and as a plant is harvested correctly and a whole plant, you're going to get some of that in plants that are a good host for that particular strain of bacteria. Well, Agaricus is one, and that's why I brought this up. Another one is, you mentioned the B vitamins with Shiitake, Valerie, and that's one for certain. It's found in pretty decent amounts. So NeuroIM wouldn't be, I wouldn't say, oh, it's number one for B12 with Soul. I'd say longevity, and probably also probio. We added the strain, remember Propionum bacterium, the PF strain, which actually manufactures B12. Well, that's one of the strains. We don't presume to know all the different strains that make B12 in nature, but mushrooms are fantastic. Remember that whole discussion on mycelium from Dr. Allison, and I can't remember how much time, Val, if you spent some time on that last week, but they always amaze me, mushrooms, how they can transfer nutrients where they see a need. So the B vitamins and yes, even B12, I stand firmly with, yes, you can find them, and they have been measured in some of the mushrooms, and it's not because they're dirty, because we get clean, we can do micro counts, micro growth counts, and you can still find some. So yet another thing to put into the box about these amazing mushrooms, a little bit of B12 too. What I wanted to share with you tonight, in addition to that thought, is that in this group of 10, and it was really hard for us to stop at 10, okay? We actually had 2 others that we were so tempted to put in, okay? Who knows, maybe we'll use one of them in the future. I don't know that we'll mess with this, to be honest. We really, really love this formula just as is. But we could use them in other things as we do use, as Valerie mentioned, why am I drawing like the pretty red mushroom, reishi. Reishi, we use that in ProBioIQ, right? Because it is an adaptogen. And yeah, the king in so many opinions of Chinese philosophy. But there's another one in here we felt it's just getting its day in the sun now. And we added it in large amounts. And this was the last piece of information I wanted to share with you. If you start to hear more and more about lion's mane, which we talked about last week, Valerie taught us about it. The amount of lion's mane in here, it is, I'll tell you, I don't usually tell you our formulas. We like to keep those proprietary. But this one aspect, I will say, slightly more than 1/5 of that capsule, of each capsule of NeuroIM is lion's mane. In addition to that amount, we use a special 10 times concentrate of the entire mushroom. We are not using an extract that takes certain components, which you can find. I mean, I love that there are lots of options now. There are mushrooms are absolutely some of the most, let's call it pot-shotted, or that's not even the right word to use, where they'll pick and choose active ingredients out of them and leave the rest. We are not nearly that bold. We're strong believers in the blend, in the mix of what the mushroom has in it and the cofactors, et cetera, and supporting components. And so it is the entire lion's mane. It is not just a very studied component, but it is a 10 times concentrate. So what does that mean? If you run across someone that uses lion's mane, every capsule of NeuroIM is like giving them 5. They're getting 5 capsules of a good quality lion's mane. So back to Valerie's comment, it's no wonder we see such change when people start to use this, because I'm just giving you one ingredient now. Of the other mushroom, of the other 10, all but 3 are concentrated extracts, and the others we wanted them as is with powder, but it's a high quality powdered mushroom, freeze-dried mushroom. So I don't know. It would be interesting at some point to look at how many bottles. Valerie's thinking. I like what she made me think of this earlier by mentioning that. If you were to gather all this up, you would be buying 4 or 5 probably of a good quality standard product, and you're getting it in one formula, combined among the very best that we see in medicinals. But also we chose them because we also liked they were the most complete extracts that were available in concentrations. So I do love it. If that's helpful to you, in case someone's like, oh, but I just want some lion's mane. Oh, you got lion's mane, and probably more than you're taking in this. But it is an adaptogen. It is one the body. You're not going to take too much lion's mane, and that's why we did what we did with it in this formula. Back to you, Val.
Fantastic. Thank you, Greg. Yes, and the fact that Soul does use that whole plant like that we've got that whole mushroom, I believe is one of our actual secret weapons, so to say, as to why our formulas are so powerful and we get the results that we do. So a couple of years ago, I presented an idea of having people think outside the capsule. And so when we were in Hawaii a little over a year ago, I'd asked a good friend of mine to share on the results that she'd had with using NeuroIM in a unique way.
So my husband works in a plant situation where they have cold, and sometimes they have to go into the cold tunnel, and a lot of people get respiratory congestion issues. It's huge, and what happened was everybody was kind of spreading it to one another, and there was, I figured my voice carries, we got it. So when you have a respiratory condition going on, what it did, he came home and he kept coughing, and he just wouldn't shake the cough, and he'd tell me, where everybody else has it at work, and I said, but that doesn't mean you have to have it, because I know your terrain. We're working on your terrain, and it should be recovering. So what it did, we were sitting there one Saturday afternoon. We were doing some work in the house because we recently had termites, which I think was a situation also. I think both of these things going on. We removed flooring. We had a lot of uproar going on in our home. So what it did was I took a glass, I took a NeuroIM and just opened the capsule. I'm sure everybody's familiar with just how easy these capsules, we just have to jiggle them back and forth and then go ahead and put them in the glass. So I did one NeuroIM and one So Clear. Allison very well put all the different antifungals, antiviral issues, and a cough is going to come from that standpoint, antiviral. So when we're supporting the respiratory system, I did 2 ounces, maybe 3 ounces of warm water. We had fresh lemons because we live in the South. I juiced a whole lemon and put it in the glass. His father has caspicum, red pepper. He grew red pepper. He's been passed away, so we had some nice aged chow chow. So in Cajun language, chow chow is a hot sauce. People are familiar with Tabasco or different hot sauces. So what I did was I took the juice of it and just a little bit, put it in there, and then I took about 3 or 4 pieces, put it in. I started up, I gave him a taste, and he said, oh, that's delicious. So the lungs crave hot pepper. So Jennifer brought up a very good point about hot and cold conditions. When we're having a wet condition, we need to have a way to expel the chunk of mucus that's not coming up because of that cough. The cough is trying to get that mucus up. So he says, no problem, because you know he's tough, he's a man. And he says, I got this, and he just jolts it down. And he looks at me, and he does, ooh, whoa. And he looks at me, and he does, so about 10 minutes later, he coughed the mass up into the trash can. The cough was gone, totally gone. Don't underestimate our herbs, open them up.
And this is such a true testament. Many of you have heard me talk about having the NeuroIM and the Soul Clear in the tea. In fact, I do it every single morning. I add it to my cinnamate as part of my drink that I do. So the question is going to be at this point is when and how, when should we consider using the NeuroIM? This is when I'm going to consider and look at this as a solution or as in part of the protocol that we use. Brain-related issues or trauma, blood sugar concerns, abnormal cellular growth, immune system support, pregnancy. Remember I was talking about the story about our daughter, and we've used it with a lot of pregnancies now. Mentally demanding work, nerve issues, if there's a family history of any of these type of issues. And keep in mind, I'm narrowing this list down. Exposure to toxins, because remember one of those mushrooms we talked about last week, its ability to, they use it in the water system by the hospitals because it could break down 70% and absorb 70% of those toxins. Vaccine injury. Many of you know my story with vaccine injury that I had when I was 21 years old. When I first started using this formula, a week or 2 into it, it started going into, I felt the same types of feelings that I had when I had the vaccine injury. As I went through and started breaking things up, this is my opinion, what was going on. And I worked through what they call a Herxheimer reaction. And within 2 days that purged, and I have never had that issue in again. And I'm 56 now. So that was huge. And then just general health support. So basically, this formula in my mind's eye is something to consider on a regular basis. It is like Tammy Peterson was saying, it just goes to the top of her mind as something she thinks about. So you guys know what a big believer I am in the Bella Health and the longevity as our foundation. You can see and how it addresses a foundation. You can see what a phenomenal fit that NeuroIM comes in and is. If we think about those roots, and part of those roots get impacted by toxins or exposure to things that are toxic, that NeuroIM is a great fit for coming in there in helping the body to prevent how that would show up in the leaves and the expression. That's what I'm looking for, the expression of how it would show up in the other body systems by getting in and removing that issue. So tonight's quote is, when health is absent, wisdom cannot reveal itself, art cannot manifest, strength cannot fight, wealth becomes useless, and intelligence cannot be applied, by Herodotus. And when you think about it, that really does make sense. When you don't feel good, you can't think, you can't come up with good solutions. You don't feel creative. You sure don't have the strength to defend yourself. It doesn't matter how much money you've got because you can't enjoy it. And you certainly can't think through or have critical thinking. Health, as we have seen many times, is absolutely critical to life. And again, if you haven't got a hold of either of these books or have them on your shelf, this is where I got the sources for all the mushroom data that I had and all the studies. These books are absolutely outstanding. Next week's topic, we will be discussing adaptogens and a healthy menstrual cycle. Several of you know that in the course of the last three weeks to almost 3 months, I've been getting massive amounts of women reaching out to me with concerns about these issues. So I've decided it's time to teach a class on it. So that's what we will be talking about next week. Please get the word out. You'll be surprised how many women are having challenges with this at the moment.